All right, what's going on, guys? It's Seth Struiksma with What's the Deal? And on today's podcast, we have a good friend, a client, an ADU expert here to talk to us all about San Diego ADUs, how to basically look at a deal if you're an investor and want to get some insight on what to do and how to do it. And honestly, this is just a jam-packed episode with so much ADU knowledge that I don't think you guys are going to want to shut it off. So stick around and here we go. What's the deal with all those old school real estate agents teaching outdated marketing techniques and living in the past? This show is about fresh ideas in real estate, diving deep into marketing, design, home renovations, and business development. But we also talk about lifestyle, health, travel, and just living an incredible life. Because the fastest way to financial freedom and fun is through real estate. It's time to build up your real estate business, serve way more clients, and have a blast doing it. So welcome to the show, Brian Koons, ADU expert and friend, client, and gosh, I'm excited to hear all about this. So let's jump into it. What's up, man?
What's up, man? Dude, thanks for having me. I'm excited. The ADU expert is probably more self-proclaimed than anything, but super excited to have you.
I think it's accepted by the community that you're now an ADU expert. Dude, just tell us kind of in your own words, your background, what you've been doing, and why you're this ADU expert.
Yeah, so long story, tried to make it short as I can. I joined the military right out of high school, did that for about 8 years. That's what brought me over to San Diego back in 2019. Found out during COVID that I wanted to be a real estate investor and did a house hack with my VA loan. Bought a 4-unit, so in San Diego, so that thing was like $1.2 million. Yep. So I learned what debt to income ratio was after I bought it. Figured out that I didn't qualify for anything past that. But I still had some capital because I didn't put any money down because it was a VA loan. So all that kind of got me into this question of like, what do I do now? Like, I have some money, I still want to do real estate, but I can't qualify for anything. Mm-hmm. And I met this guy who was talking about this thing called ADUs. And I was, his little mantra was, you build at 300, you sell at 700. And I'm like, that math makes sense. Mm-hmm. And throughout the next couple months, I was like, kind of like, this makes sense. And then met a buddy or two buddies, Rob and CJ that you know, and we all kind of talked and we're like, let's buy some land. And that is, I think,
how we met. That's how we met.
So yes. So when we bought that, obviously we were expecting to put 4 units on the property. Mm-hmm. And the month that we got into escrow was the month that the bonus ADU program came out. So all of a sudden, we heard about this thing, Info Bulletin 400, which is, the rules for ADUs.
Yep.
And we started like reading the code, reading about all these like little nuances and putting it all together. And we were like, holy shit, we can put 8 units on this thing. And so that just like blew my mind. Like, I was like, oh my God, like just like all these little pieces and puzzle pieces and stuff. It was like a game to me. And so from that point forward, for the next like year, I was still in the military, but I would, make it a point to still go to meetups and everything and like continue to look at deals and stuff. And I felt like a Jehovah's Witness trying to like tell people about our Lord and Savior Info Bulletin.
An ADU evangelist.
Yeah, like it literally, because like no one really knew what it was at that point. And so I was like going around like hyping up ADUs, gassing up ADUs. And, the company I worked for, ADU Geeks, their CEO and founder at the time, he would go to all these different meetups and stuff and teach about ADUs. And it got to the point where he literally, I'd seen him at probably 12 different events over the course of a year. And every single one, he was like, he'd ask a question and he's like, anyone except Brian can answer. Cause like he knew that I knew the answer for it. And so from there, I started working at a company called ADU Geeks. They've seen about, over 500 projects at this point, grew extremely fast. It gave me a really unique position to see and help with all those projects while also doing several of my own developments. Mm-hmm. So I got a lot of my own learning lessons, but a lot of other people's learning lessons at the same time. And it gave me this super unique place where I got a lot of learning curve out of the way extremely, extremely quickly. And just kind of, yes, I've been in the space ever since. So that's kind of very,
that's a great background. I mean, you've seen so many projects. I would just love to ask, like, okay, so let's say you're entering into the market and you want to do this and you're just a new developer or a savvy investor. Talk to us kind of about, like, you talked about this already, but how it went from 4 units to 8 units. What exactly happened with all that?
Yeah, so for that one specifically, there was obviously this Info Bulletin 400 had very clear guidelines for City of San Diego specifically that allowed these nuances, one of them being conversion of existing habitable space, which was huge. So basically you could take an actual livable unit and jam out a portion of it as a second unit. That's not allowed on multifamily anywhere else for the most part in the state except City of San Diego. And so that was part of what we did because it was land, right? So we had the world was our oyster.
Yeah.
So we we designed it in a way where we had this house and then we just had this little portion that was going to be super easy to cut out and make this separate unit on it. And then the other code was conversion of existing non-habitable space. So things like garages, basements, storage, anything like that, you can now convert that as well. So what we did was we included a garage in the design. So we could go back and convert it after, but also included carports. But then on top of that, with those three, we maxed out the floor area ratio, which that's the amount of habitable square footage you're allowed to build based on the size of the lot and some of the rules that you need to color inside of. But from there was an additional state code that allowed for one ADU or an ADU up to 800 square feet above that max floor area ratio. And we were able to basically build the house and build that 800 square feet above. And then we went back and the goal was to go back and convert those after, turn it into 4 units with, above the max FAR on each one of the lots because it was 2 lots in tandem.
So I guess I'm kind of jumping around. So this is different than, I guess, the ADU bonus program.
Yeah. So
when was this? This was like 2000.
This was December of 2020.
2020. Okay.
Yeah.
So this is different. So this is before this whole ADU bonus program came out, which we'll get into.
Yeah.
This was kind of.
Well, we went into so the month that the bonus ADU program came out was part of Info Bulletin 400. And that was in December of 2020. So it actually, we didn't really use the bonus program, but it seeing what we could do, it blew our minds with this because it's every lot now can be this multifamily thing that has gotten caught onto. But we just found a way to do it without any affordable units.
I see.
But we could have, in theory, done it with affordable, but we found a way to go over the max FAR and not include any affordable units at the same time. And so we were super happy with it.
So we're going to talk a lot of ADU lingo on this podcast, and I caution everyone to
I will do
write down
my best to
we're
break them down.
going to have a glossary at the end of it, maybe with all the words. But that sounds awesome, and I mean, we're going to dive more into that. But I wanted to just talk about kind of going back as people start talking about they're getting into an ADU project, they're excited about it. Walk us through really what the general processes are for let's say an ADU plus a garage conversion, or just kind of give us a basic timeline and kind of what you would go through as a developer or investor.
Yeah, so every project generally has the same functional steps. It's feasibility, design, permit, build. So you have to figure out if what you're trying to build can be built and if what you're trying to build makes sense to build. So it's not only physical feasibility, it's financial feasibility. So you need to be able to determine, hey, is this thing that I'm trying to build allowed to be built? And then, do the numbers make sense? Am I going to be able to finance it?
That's the biggest part. I feel like so many people overlook that. They're like, oh, I can build 20 units. Great. And then they figure out they can't afford it.
Yeah, we can dive into that. I just posted on Instagram today about that. I talked to somebody yesterday, got him pushed to me from one of my buddies, got on a call, and he bought this land in the middle of a canyon in the middle of Mission Hills, which is he's a great area, and he got it for $28,000. So in his mind, he's like, I got to steal. We're going to build this luxury house and it's going to be beautiful. And I'm like, buddy, there's no infrastructure. You have no streets. There's canyons. There's drainage issues. There's soils issues. There's infrastructure issues.
Got a really nice piece of land.
Yeah. I'm like, you might, if possibly you were allowed to build outside of because their argument was oh, we went to the city and the zoning allows it. I'm like, sure, the zoning may allow it, but it doesn't mean that you can actually build it because of all these other things.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, so that that in itself, the physical and financial feasibility, basically that is about 90% of the project.
Wow.
If you buy something or a lot of people own land already or own a property and now they're trying to figure out how do I put an ADU on this? Instead of asking the question, does this actually make sense to build an ADU? Or should I take the equity I have and put it into a new project that is fit for ADUs? I think that's where a lot of people get stuck.
Dang. Okay, so you have the feasibility. What's after that?
So feasibility, figuring out conceptually, like, general sizes, general building separations and stuff with a conservative estimate. The next one is design. So that's when you actually get into the like schematic design, which is where you're drawing. You actually engage an architect or a draftsman or whoever is going to draw it for you based on the scope of work. That's when you're actually going to like really start getting into the the box, the conceptual design. So it's like, hey, here's the box, here's the size of the units, etc. Then you start saying, okay, here's where bathrooms go, here's where bedrooms go, here's where kitchens go. Let's put the kitchens on the same wall so you're sharing plumbing. So and that's where like this value engineering really starts to come into play. Which is value engineering is essentially just getting a contractor to tell you how to build it cheap. Not only the architect or the drawer is only concerned about doing it the way that is allowed to be done. Where the contractor is concerned about how they do it the cheapest. So marrying those two makes the project significantly better over time. Where a lot of people, myself being included in the beginning, like forgot that the value engineering was a thing. And so now we got pro into permits and we're like, that was stupid. Why did the architect draw it like that? Yeah. And it's because like they didn't care about it. And like, you need to, generally they learn over time, but it's like if they're newer, it's like they may not know all of it. And you need to be able to come in and say like, no, change that, window here, make it a standard sized window. So that way we can order them all in bulk and we don't have to order custom windows and, hey, water heaters, whatever, like all these different examples.
This is all really good. Okay.
So that's the next phase is design. Once you draw it and you get it, you get all the vendors approved. So vendors being like structural engineers, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, soils engineers, anyone that like is needed to actually get the full plan set drawn, not just the layout of the floor plan. From there, you submit to the city. The city now basically gives their revisions because normally most people aren't going to get it submitted or approved on the first go around. So that whole permitting process is kind of like what we know as the black hole of development, where you submit it and then just kind of sits there for a while. They're getting faster, so they'll leave their review comments. You then bring it back to the architect, or the architect brings it back, takes a look at all of it. From there, they say, okay, these comments, the mechanical, electrical, plumbing engineer needs to fix. These comments, the structural engineer need to fix, and they push them out to everyone. They make their revisions. They bring it back in. The architect takes all of that, puts it into a pretty format again, and then they submit it again for another round of revisions. And then you just continue that cycle for as many rounds as it takes. Normally 2 to 4, depending on the project size, is what you could probably expect. And then from there, it's the build. And then you build it out and do whatever you want with it after that.
How long would you say it takes from the purchase to stick build, like going up?
So obviously it depends on the size.
Sure.
I would say, most projects you can give a rough timeline. If it's 1 to 4 units, probably 10 to 14 months. Full cycle is what you should probably expect. Obviously, with experience, some projects take longer if you miss things than the feasibility. If the company you're using isn't necessarily like as efficient as you'd want, it could take longer. But I've had one that has taken 6 months to get 5 units permitted, and then I've had an 8 unit that's taken 3 years almost and is about to be permitted.
Wow.
So it's really like setting up the project and being an actual development manager, making it like pushing things forward instead of just letting the architect or letting whoever like just kind of go at their own pace really makes a difference.
So all these ADUs, I mean, they're going up everywhere. I mean, it's like the hot topic. Everyone talks about it. How is it affecting the rental market? How is it affecting the neighborhoods? And where do you see this going with the rental market overall? Because everyone's building. Everyone's doing this, whether they're good projects or bad projects. People are building. And so do you see it slowing down? Do you see a kind of a suppression on rents? Where do you see this going for like the next 5 years? And how do you think it's affecting rental market in general?
Yeah, all of those are really good questions, and everything I'm saying is 100% true if it's right, or a complete guess if it's wrong. And I mean, like, so number one, it's very area dependent. If you're in North Park or Hillcrest, like we're in right now, obviously there's a ton going up. That's all these like larger, 30, 50 unit structures or 15 unit structures with 1 bedrooms and studios.
Yep.
So I think that certain sub markets with certain products are going to get oversaturated, and I think that it's going to either bring down the rents like you see in like Texas or something, But in general, I think that, when people say, oh, none of these ADUs are affordable, it's not solving the housing or, the affordability crisis. To me, most of it is more like it's not lowering rents. What it's doing is it's preventing the inflation of rents because now there's more supply, so it just will not go up as fast. So yes, like they're not affordable units as what people probably generally think, but it's preventing the rents from going up en masse in the same way. So I think that overall,
that's a really good point. That's a really good point because a lot of people are upset with the rents in San Diego, and it's really expensive. So yeah, maybe it's not going to go up as high, but at least it's keeping it where it is.
Exactly.
For a while.
And that's kind of like the goal of it, because it's like we only have like 116 moderate units that have been built through the bonus program, I think. But so everyone's like, oh, it's only 116 units that are affordable. It's like, well, yes, but think about how many others are now on market at roughly market rate. And so how much more it will prevent going up over time. So I think that's like part of it. I think, a big thing is like you touched on it, is there's a lot of there's this really unique opportunity where kind of anyone can be a developer, right? You don't have to cut your teeth and do flips and, get into projects and learn from people. It's like, if you have a house, like you're sitting on land that's underdeveloped. And so all these people now have the opportunity to go in and we saw it in San Diego, 2-3 years ago. The question was just, how many can I fit?
Yeah.
There was never like, what should I build? What would be good for the area? What are tenants going to want? It was just like, you got 8,000 square feet of max floor area ratio, so we're going to build, 2,400 square foot units or whatever it was.
Yeah.
So that, I think there's going to be certain projects that I'm not a huge fan of that I think are going to not do as well as I hope. I think it's going to have a lot higher turnover, a lot higher vacancy, and it's going to make the pro forma look a lot less sexy than it originally did. But
What would you consider a good project, like a good ADU development project, and what's a bad ADU project?
Yeah, so it's a term that I like to use called like tasteful development.
Oh, I like that.
I don't know. It's projects that you're like, yeah, that makes sense. Like that looks nice. And it's like there's not like a specific thing. I'd say generally like, if you can have a level of parking, I'd say half a parking spot per unit is like the bare minimum that I would be looking for on anything I'm doing now.
Yep.
Having some sort of open space, some sort of private, outdoor space if you can.
What about unit mix? Like all one bedrooms, or should you have unit mix? Or
so
what's kind of your thought on ideal unit mix?
So for me, I don't want to do anything that has less than 2 bedrooms moving forward for a long time.
Why is that?
I think that so many people have been incentivized to build studios and 1 bedrooms in these smaller units that it's now becoming so oversaturated. And also the tenant base tends to be somebody who's more nomadic and more mobile.
Yep.
Where the person, like my demographic, we can get into like, my buy box and why it's my buy box, but the slightly larger units, not like 1,200 square foot just because I can, but moderately sized 2 bedrooms and 3 bedrooms, if you can make it work, I think are extremely acceptable for the reduction in potential rent on paper because of the decreased management stress, the decreased vacancy, and the fact that you will have a premium product because no one else is building it. So if you can find the capital, or you have the capital that's patient, I think long-term you're going to win.
That's a really good point. Wow. Because there's so many 1 bedrooms and studios that have gone up with no parking all around here. I mean, we know those projects. Talk about the whole ADU bonus program and why this is even happening and what it exactly is and how it affects neighborhoods and developers and what it actually is.
Yeah, so basically, long story short, it was something that state said, hey, everyone needs some sort of like affordable program for ADUs or for housing. And this was City of San Diego's answer. And what it is, it's called the ADU bonus program. And it allows for past the state level allowance of ADUs, whether it be 1, 2, or 8 now, depending on the area and the property. They say, cool, you can build and you can max out whatever state says. And then on top of that, up to that max floor area ratio, which is the amount of habitable space you're allowed to build in whatever size unit mix and whatever unit mix you want, between 150 square feet and 1,200 square feet, you can do a deed restricted ADU that can be low, very low, or moderate income, which that is based on essentially there is a certain income threshold that is the area median income for San Diego County, and it says, I think it's like 116,000 or something right now, and that's 100%. So we'll say it's $100,000 is AMI, is 100% AMI. You are allowed to rent out that affordable ADU for 80 to 110%. So the way it works is they find somebody, if you make $100,000, you're at 100% AMI. They allow 30% of that to be dedicated towards the rent, so $30,000. They divide that $30,000 by 12, and that's how much rent you're allowed to pay per month.
Wow.
So that's how it works, and it's their way to kind of like create an affordability index. What we see, and what a lot of people have seen, is they look at the chart, and $100,000, 116 grand is not not cheap or not a low income. So everyone built these moderate income units because they were like, oh, we can actually rent it out at above or at market rate, and the issue is you have to find somebody that has that income while also wanting to live in the affordable unit that you're building, which is a much smaller demographic of people than we once thought. And so all these people building 20, 30, 40, 50 moderate income ADUs and expecting to get the top of 110% AMI are out of their mind. And so now, kind of having that perspective, it's like all those things, the bonus program has been great. But yes, those are some of like the nuances of
Interesting. Yeah, I didn't know about that. I mean, these are great points that you wouldn't think about.
Right.
You wouldn't think about at all. Because you're right. The affordable unit might be a not as desirable unit for compared to the others. So it's really interesting. Wow. So where are you seeing the biggest growth for ADUs right now and development in general?
So the biggest growth right now is in North Park, is what I would say. And the reason why is, so like 3 years ago, I did like a super nerdy thing where it took me like 3 days to do this. And what I did was I cross-referenced a regular map so I could like see the properties with a zoning map that showed like each specific zoning. And I cross-referenced like the size of the lots, the amount that it had built on the lots, and the rents in the areas. And you started to see these trends of, certain areas are really high rents, but not a lot of buildable area and bad zoning. Some areas are really high rent relative to everywhere else, really good zoning, but not a lot of buildable space, like Claremont, for example. Other ones are, really good zoning, tons of buildable space, and high rents relative to everywhere else. And if you, asked me 3 years ago where the best spot was, it was, or I guess 3 or 4 years ago now, really, from now, it was North Park. It was a perfect example. A lot of underdeveloped lots, good RM zoning, and, rents were relatively high between, if you looked at North Park and Golden Hill, it was a huge spread. Now, if you look at it, it's not really much different. And then, 2 years ago when I did this, like the next place that I found was like if you had to guess, like where, 2 years ago, where would you say it had relatively high rents?
Yeah, I would have said North Park. Yeah, I would have said like North Park's a great zone, but now it's, I would say, oversaturated with inventory now. And it's kind of like, take your pick. There's a lot to choose from now in that area. So I don't know. I don't even know.
So the one that I found was Linda Vista.
Oh, interesting.
That was the next one that had relatively underdeveloped lots, decent zoning, and relatively high rents compared to, the acquisition price. And so that's where I had been buying for a couple years. So that's just like, I guess some background on like how to, kind of pick an area and take those factors into account.
What about like other areas that have like complete communities or like opportunity zones, like Grant Hill, Barrio Logan, Logan Heights? Is that room for growth, or is that kind of like not really good rents but buildable space? But
yeah, well, that's a really good example of one that has decently underdeveloped lots. It has decent or good zoning. It has the highest that it really gets is like RM37, not RM39, which is dense for sure, but it's not like the densest like North Park is. But the rents are super low comparatively to somewhere like PB or North Park. So the issue is like the cost to build is exactly the same whether you're building in PB or in Canto, right?
Yeah.
So the thing that changes is the rents and obviously the acquisition price. So it's like being able to, find the area that makes sense for all three at a certain time. That's what kind of like progresses this change and this I don't want to say gentrification, but this change in the environment.
Yeah. It's a good point, because you're right. Like, those neighborhoods don't have the biggest rents,
Yeah.
and I don't think they're going to go up much higher.
And so in order to make it pencil in areas like that, you have to be building so much that it becomes overwhelming for some people. And that's where this thing with the bonus program in city council the other week like came into effect. Was in an area like in Canto, they have these really big lots that now with the bonus program they can add a significantly higher density than they've ever been able to. And that's the way that you make it to where you can make it pencil to be able to justify raising the money and capital to build it. Otherwise, no housing would get built. And it obviously it's very drastic for certain homeowners and stuff that live in the area. So
it's really drastic. So what are some of the good zoning? What would you call it? RM? What's that called exactly?
So there's
zoning code, zoning
there's
numbers,
zoning designations.
Okay, got it.
Yeah. So the way it works, for anyone who's listening, that every property is zoned a specific thing. It has a specific zoning designation.
And this is different than what's on the Realist Report. Agents who are listening, this is not the same. So
this
listen.
is not R1, R2, R3, R4.
Exactly. That's not the same,
so
right?
I have actually found almost every single one of my deals from an agent that does not actually understand what they're holding.
Oh, most don't. So please tell us what it actually is, and how to find it.
Yeah. So zoning is, like I said, it's the lines you have to color inside of. So you get the designation, and that can be. It could be R1, R2, R3, R4 in certain municipalities still, but City of San Diego especially has changed drastically. So if you see that, it's wrong, 100%. They have this certain zoning designation that gives you, it's basically like a code, right? So it's RM11, residential multifamily 1-1, RS17, residential single family 1-7, whatever it is. You then take that, and the way you find it, you can literally just Google San Diego zoning map or whatever municipality you're looking for, zoning map. And almost every single one has like an interactive map that you can just type in the address and you go find it. So it's super like simple to find.
So let's say RM blah blah blah. What do those numbers mean?
So it's literally just a different designation. So you're gonna take that code. So you go to the zoning map, you find the zoning designation, then you go over to that city's municipal code, and that municipal code is the whole textbook on what you're allowed to build, how much you're allowed to build, how high you're allowed to build, how far away from the lot lines you need to stay, how far away from other buildings you have to stay. And that's the lines you have to color inside of.
Just so kind of find what it is.
Exactly. So you just, most cases you find, RM11, if that's the one you're looking for. And then it has like a very clear designation of like height limit, setback, building separation, density, all these things. And then those are the lines you have to color inside of for when you're looking at like physical feasibility and financial feasibility. It's like, hey, the density says I'm allowed 2 units and the height limit is 30 feet. So, and I have to stay 5 feet away from the setback. So now it's like, here's my box to play in. What can I build inside of this box? And that's how you do it. And it's like it's literally the same. I'm from Ohio originally, and I literally was like curious. I'm like, can I like figure out what I could build on this lot in like Menor, Ohio? And I went through, and like zoning code is like pretty much set up a very similar structure. So once you understand it, it's relatively simple, not necessarily easy because there's a lot of stuff to find, which is why I made money for the past couple of years, because it tends to be fairly complicated.
Confusing. It is.
There's rabbit holes that you go down and stuff like that, but it's like fundamentally that's how you do it.
What would you say is one of the more favorable zoning designations?
So it's a really good question because
I guess it's subjective too.
It's somewhat subjective.
Yeah.
Depending on your strategy, depending on how much existing space you have on the lot. Like you could have a really good zoned lot with no buildable space and it doesn't matter. Or you could have a single family zoned lot with 10,000 square feet of space on a super buildable lot. And all of a sudden you're like, that's an 8 unit. Like, and so it completely changes it. So it's a combination of like all the factors: acquisition price, area, what you're trying to build, the zoning, and allowances. It's really more like, what am I allowed to build, not necessarily what the zoning is. It just tells you how much you're allowed to build.
I see. But there's probably some that are good.
There are some that, so for me, like and maybe I'll just kind of like go into the buy box.
Yeah, what do you like? You're a savvy investor. Like, what would be something you're looking for?
So I actually almost only go towards single family homes that are zoned single family. Reason why?
Like RS 1-1.
RS 17, RS 15. So that's actually a really good point that you just brought up. Is there's several RS designations. So RS 11, RS 12, 13, whatever. This city of San Diego council meeting that they had is taking away the bonus program in all of the RS zones except 15, 16, and 17.
Oh, I was wondering that. Okay,
So-
got it.
So that's actually super important. So yeah, like RS 11, like in theory, they're going through and they're likely going to be removing the bonus program allowance from those areas. But RS 16, 15, 16, 17, those are like, that's like 75% of city of San Diego. So it's like most places are not going to be like too negatively affected by it. It's only these very specific lots in these very specific areas that have this like less dense zoning designation. But for me, like I actually prefer these single family zoned neighborhoods because it's a different strategy than somebody going and looking for the RM lot in the RM neighborhood in the dense, urban core. I would rather go find a nice distressed single family home in a neighborhood and then go and add a tasteful amount of units that enhances the property's value, is not extremely noticeable from the perspective of if you were just looking from the street, it just may look like a bigger house kind of thing. And you now, because you're in a single family neighborhood, number one, parking is likely not going to be a huge issue because everyone has off-street parking. Number two, you now have a product because you're not going to be building, 1,500, 1,800 square foot houses with this. You're going to be building more modestly sized 1, 2, 3 bedroom units. You've now monopolized a product that does not exist in that market, that is less conducive to more developers coming in. And so if you can get past these slightly lower returns and slightly lower cash flow day one, your management headache, your rents, and your overall vacancy are going to be significantly improved because you're going to have a product that doesn't exist and you're going to have people pounding at your door to rent it out.
Yeah. What would Mr. Homeowner in Kensington say to that?
So
Because that's a residential neighborhood, and those probably exist.
yeah,
in that
so
neighborhood.
you're never going to make everyone happy. You're always going to piss somebody off.
Yeah.
My goal is to make the best outcome for the most people long term as possible. People don't like change, and I saw that a ton during this past meeting with the city council.
Yep.
People just don't like change, and
Yep.
I understand that. Like I always make the joke, I'm like, I'm a NIMBY too, where I live. Like I get it. Like
Yeah.
So it's finding this balance between just improving the spreadsheet, but also thinking about the neighborhood, because the spirit and intent is to increase density, to allow more people to live in certain neighborhoods and help with the housing crisis we have. It's not to, maximize IRR. And I get that. Like that's, if it wasn't financially feasible, no units would get built. So there is that factor. So it's, what can I do that gets those financial returns while also keeping with the spirit and intent of what the code was made for, especially this bonus ADU program, while also like you got to put food on the table too. So it's like the reality is like, you're going to have two sides. You're going to have the person that's lived there for 20 or 30 years that, doesn't want the change. And it's like, sorry, when you bought your house, my dad was busy being 10. I can't participate.
Yeah.
And then you have the other side that's, the college student that's like, bro, I just want to live here. Like, I just want to live here. And I'm, I'm an in-plant. Like, I came from Ohio and I moved over here 6 years ago. And I'm like, if I can just help some people get into a neighborhood and live there and experience San Diego. And, I would argue there's a ton of things about San Diego that make you your highest, best self.
Yep.
That I'm going to do it. And yeah, you're going to have pissed off neighbors.
Yeah.
But as long as you're doing your best to keep with what the spirit and intent is, not just maximizing your profit, I think that, people will generally tend to forget after a week or two.
Tasteful development, as you said it before.
Development.
Not 40 units on a lot. Maybe won't.
Yeah,
Maybe
unless
isn't
it
tasteful.
makes sense. Like,
Maybe,
right? Maybe it does.
I don't
but
know if
yeah,
maybe in the
like-
heart of a residential neighborhood it would make
like
sense.
a tangible example. I have a property over in Allied Gardens that we did a garage conversion and 2 units in the back. And when you look at it from the street, it just looks like a big house. There's plenty of parking. There's plenty of street parking, and you can't even tell that there's like multiple units when you look at it from the front. We could have put 9 units on the property, and
Sheesh.
we didn't.
Yeah.
And it's just in hindsight, like even I had my partner kind of like telling hey, maybe we shouldn't do that many. And I was actually more aggressive at that time. And I'm look back now and I'm like, I'm so glad we didn't do that. And yeah, so it's just keeping with the spirit and intent first, and the end user first rather than the financial.
I love that. Dude, so you're starting off on your own. You've recently left ADU Geeks. You're kind of going on your own. I'm really excited for you. You're a wealth of knowledge. Tell everyone kind of what this next chapter entails and what you offer, and how can people get a hold of you?
Yeah, I appreciate it. So slight background at ADU Geeks. I ran development for them. I'd seen like 500 projects that have given me that learning curve and gotten over and stuff. So I have a lot of like very unique knowledge in my head on how to build, how to prevent issues, like how to determine scope and figure out what actually fits a property and stuff, and effectively manage projects through the process. But now I'm working to get that out to more people, and kind of democratize the access to my brain, where I only have so many hours of the day. So I'm working on putting together an education program right now for people to build ADUs and get them most of the way there by themselves, as well as some helping with feasibility studies and things for people that really want the help to make sure what they're trying to build is both physically and financially feasible. And then the high level people that kind of just want the hands-off experience. They want somebody who's done many projects to help out and has a team of people that have done that, doing very boutique development management for people, so helping people along that process, generally focusing on the people that just want the hands-off experience, and helping them build their projects.
So cool. Yeah. So excited for you.
I appreciate it.
This is really cool. Thank you for just sharing your knowledge. This was great. I learned a lot, so I'm excited for your future. Congrats.
Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, of course.
Appreciate you.
Woohoo. Hey there. If you like this episode or want a real estate connection in San Diego, find me on Instagram and subscribe so you don't miss any of these fun episodes. See you next time.